Hey everybody, it's Tracy Brown, and it is the third Wednesday in July that we are focusing on the secret fears of LGBTQ plus champions. And so we're taking 4 Wednesdays in, I said July, didn't I? We are taking 4 Wednesdays in the month of June to really explore what are some of the things that even your friends who are champions or allies to the LGBTQ plus community, things that they may not even have said to you. So we are going to really dive right in. We have been looking at a variety of topics, but for this third session, we are focusing on ideas for nurturing the relationships you have with your existing champions. And just keep in mind, if you have not been able to watch or listen to part 1 or part 2, some people might say that for champions, they're thinking about allies, and that would work. You also can have champions who are members of the group and self-identify as LGBTQ plus. And so I'm using champions for some very intentional reasons, which I think I talk about in week 2 or session 2. But today, for session 3, we're going to focus in on some ideas, half dozen and maybe a bonus or two, of how you can nurture the relationships with your existing champions. And that's really because even though in the second part we talked about recruiting new people, I don't want you to take your current champions and allies for granted. So let's dive in with some ideas, and maybe some of these you are already doing. Number 1, provide signs and labels and pins and clothing and other items that people can use, that your champions can use to indicate that they are supportive of or they are committed to LGBTQ plus respect and safety. And one of the reasons I bring this up is because often um, your champions may think of certain things on their own or may develop certain things on their own. But when you, as an organization or in your community or your association, when you're providing certain things, what happens is then it's not just one person, right? People will start seeing that same sign or sticker, or in the image, the, baseball cap, right? That you, when you as an organization, as an employee resource group, or as a community nonprofit, when you are providing people with these resources, then you also not only are marketing, but you are providing a consistent visual image. And it could be as simple as an example I used earlier of having everybody wear a rainbow sticker on their name tag at a conference, right? The investment cost is relatively low depending on the size of your conference. You don't want to invest in something where you're spending $10 per person, right? But you want it to be visible, and what a difference that can make. On the other hand, if you're in a corporation and your ERG is doing series of activities for Pride Month, then maybe you want to do a water bottle and encourage people to really carry that water bottle to all the events and to all the meetings they go to through the month of June and beyond, right? So the investment you make, is going to be impacted by your budget and how it will be used. but you want to provide some of those kinds of tools and resources for your constituency, and especially for the champions. So, number two, I invite you to think about tapping into my individual skills, my talents, and my network. For me to be a champion, I'm more than likely willing to step in. So a lot of times in organizations I've worked with, what's happened is that the client or the organization, they're like, well, yeah, here's what we want our champions to do. We want them to show up at our events, and we do want that. I do want that for you. And if I'm able to recognize specific talents or skills that people have, I want to use those because that's something they know how to do, they love to do it, and they will volunteer in additional ways. And you'll notice that the slide also says tap into my network. Some of that may happen naturally, but if you are thinking about really nurturing the relationships you have with existing champions, then you also want to provide them with some pre-written content, or you want to give them specific invitations that are individual or personalized invitations for them to send out to their network. And in the context of when you do have needs for events that are coming up, just like each of your champions has specific skills and talents, ask your champions who they know who have the specific talents or skills you need for an upcoming event or program. Number three, one of the things you can nurture and you can use to retain the champions you have is to focus on respect more than rights. Now, the caveat here is if you're HRC and you are recruiting volunteers or you have champions, HRC has as a very important aspect of their mission, they are actually advocating for rights, and they are actually involved in political action groups and things like that. So if that's a part of your mission and a part of your focus, then of course you're going to do that. But I'm thinking about how often I've been in professional associations working with clients or working with employee resource groups or DEI advisory councils in corporations. And when I get to do focus groups, or I'm talking to people maybe who were champions at one point, but they kind of slacked off, over and over and over, what I hear is, well, I think everybody should be respected. But the group really started focusing on political topics and trying to get us to go to protests. And there are people who will want to do that. But if you're in a corporate environment or an association environment, the way that you retain your allies is to get them connected into what is the mission of our association or our organization. And and we believe everybody should be respected or included or valued. And so that is what's going to get people to stay. And the percentage of people who are willing to, interested in, and passionate about the political actions or the focus on human rights, and you're going to have some intersectionality. So you're going to have people who that is their jam. They're going to do that anyway. And so think about the fact that the large majority of your champions are focused more on making sure, ensuring, and taking a stand for respect within the workplace or within the association, and don't try to push them toward the conversation about, or not even the conversation about. That doesn't usually get champions to back down. It's when they feel pushed or expected to be out on the front lines in a protest or to write a check for political action activities. All right, next, because I want to keep going, I want to try to give you back some time. So the next one is feature me as a champion and other champions in articles, in social media, and in event promotion. Now, this one is a little tricky because there are some champions who would prefer to stay anonymous. So I'm not really saying feature all individual people one at a time, but feature the contributions that your allies and your champions are making. With their permission, feature some of them in the social media that you do. And you don't necessarily have to label them as champions or as allies. You are just featuring them, and people who know them will know that. Okay, so feature us in articles, in your social media, and in event promotion. Use me to strategically spread the message. Strategically spread the message and recruit more champions. So you might have someone who's a champion speak at a meeting or at an important, influential meeting. You might strategically use me because I will give a testimonial. You might strategically use me as a buddy to someone who's new to the ERG or new to being an ally. You can use me in a strategic way to tell my story. And so when you do that, what really is happening to a certain degree is you're co-opting me into the fold and into being a spokesperson, a visible person. And once I say yes to that, it's harder for me to kind of distance myself, at least with people who know me. So all of your champions won't want to do that. But if you can do that in a strategic way, then it helps me be more committed, and it helps you actually grow the retention of your champions. I also want to say one more thing about the word strategically, because often what happens is you go to your champions at the last minute and, oh, we've got this going on and I need you to stop what you're doing right now and either go represent us here, or could you just like meet me in 15 minutes and let me take a quick video of you that we can use to promote, whatever's coming up. And a lot of champions will say yes, especially if they've been, supporting you for a long time. But when I say strategically, I'm really thinking, sit down and plan out, what are your messages that you want your champions and your allies to give? And then where throughout the year is it really important to place those messages because you're trying to reach a specific target audience? And that way there's some planning involved. And even when you ask me, I don't get the sense that, oh, well, maybe they're just asking me because it's last minute and I just happen to be conveniently available. Like, I actually hear there's a strategy to this, and there's not desperation, and there's not just last minute action. I'm actually a part of a strategic marketing and or a strategic plan for visibility. And that will keep people engaged. And I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute. So, another thing you can do to retain your champions is to model inclusion in other ways. So, in an earlier section, I talked about how one of the things that kept people from volunteering or from getting deeply involved was that the employee resource group or the community group that was recruiting them did not seem to have a lot of diversity outside of the LGBTQ plus community already. And even within the people who were volunteering or leading, who self-identified as a part of the LGBTQ plus community, that there was very limited diversity in race, in age, or generational experience or representation. Um, and so it's like, oh, if we want to have all kinds of people being champions for who we are and what we are doing, part of what has to happen is we have to model being inclusive as it relates to age, as it relates to religion, as it relates to ethnicity, as it relates to professions or professional skills, as it relates to all the different ways in my community or in my organization, that all the different ways diversity shows up. So if you are trying to nurture the champions you have, they have to see that you're walking the talk, not just only focused on what you are doing or your particular group. And this one seems so basic, but it is so overlooked. If you want to retain your champions, please say thank you. And I do mean say thank you because, oh, I helped to make this event this week really great or, run smoothly. Yes, say thank you at the time of the event. But when I'm saying thank you here, what I want to encourage you to do is think again about all throughout the year. How will your champions know you appreciate them? At some different time of the year, what that may seem random, but it's very strategic on your part. Do you have gifts for your champions? Or do you have a time of the year where you send everyone who's been a champion or who you've identified as a champion just an email that says, hey, want to take some time? One group that I worked with, we were talking about this. This was maybe about 7 years ago. We were talking about how do we reward and recognize our champions. And in this particular case, this group had a pretty robust system for tracking the people who had volunteered. And so we were talking about this, I think, well, no, it was in October because we were preparing for the next year. And so I said, you know what? What if you sent a Valentine in February? What if you sent a Valentine to all of the folks who volunteered for you during this calendar year? And by February, you would know a lot of the events that are planned, at least for the first half of the year, and the big events for the whole year. So why don't you send everybody a Valentine's card or a Valentine's email or a Valentine's text message? I might add now, even though 7 years ago that was not an effective way to reach this group. And they did it. And literally, it was just a way of saying thank you. We see you, we appreciate you, and we want to stay engaged with you. It was great. So, what are the ways that you might be able to say thank you? That's what I want you to think about. So, remember this. Keeping your champions engaged over a long period of time isn't easy because there are many other groups, many other programs, there are many other activities they could choose to be involved in. So remember that your long-term champions are probably more interested in the impact that your group is having or that they are having, but more than just being busy or signing up for one more activity. Remember that your long-term champions will stay or return when they feel valued. And remember that your champions who stick with you over a long time will be more likely to recruit others when they see and know how to talk about the results that you are having, because they're their results too. They will feel invested and they will feel like they are a part of what is happening. So those are just some ideas for you today for nurturing the champions you already have and building stronger relationships with them this entire month, this month of June, not July, is all about the secret fears of LGBTQ plus champions. And every Wednesday in June, I've been sharing information with you. So next week, we'll focus on building trust and having your champions be a part of transformation and long-term success. And if by some reason you did not see part one or part two, then I just want to remind you to, look for them. You can go to achievinginclusion.com and find a link to the playlist. And week one, we talked about what is it that contributes to the fear or the reluctance or the hesitancy that people have to become known as champions for the LGBTQ plus employees or members or people in your community. Week two was focused on increased comfort when you're approaching people who you might be able to recruit as champions. And again, today was all about nurturing your relationships with the champions you already have. My name is Tracy Brown. This has been all about addressing the secret fears of your LGBTQ champions. And I look forward to being with you again next Wednesday.